Djaga Djema. This is how you say, spirits await, a greeting in the Jeenare Fae language of Old Lore. Welcome to Part 3 of the Lor'Avvu descriptive audio comic. This time I will describe the images on pages 13 through the conclusion of the introduction to Act 1. Let's begin. The Tulrat grabs the round tablet and appears to hold it up into the star-speckled sky, with its tiny jaws open, and the decoration of its skull appearing like pointy sideburns. The squid-like puppet squats in the corner of the image, a blank, bulging eye hanging into the firelight. The Tulrat scolds,
"Give me that! It says right here in the middle, Lor'Avvu. That's how it starts. That means Mr. Avvu."
The old man purses his lips and juts his chin in a comical frown, the tips of his mustache slightly curled. He glances down, his left half in firelight.
"That's not what I heard."
The silhouette of the boulder and Tulrat seem to shout at the old man, who looks up, his jaw dropping.
"Explain yourself, you ugly old fool!"
The Tulrat's long ears and bead-ended strings fly from his head violently as the man just curls his hand on the top of his staff. With just the tops of children's heads glancing up at her through dissipating sparks from the fire circle, the old woman lays a commanding gesture in the air, made more dramatic by the fact that her arm and her neck are the only things lit by the fire.
"Be nice to my husband, you little monster, or I will cook you and feed you to the children," she exclaims, her shrunken old mouth curving into a grimace and a shock of old hair springing from her shaded forehead. The Tulrat dances above the rock rebelliously, his skull in a grin, while casting an enlarged shadow of himself on the smoke rising up around the boulder. Its puny impetuousness apparently exhausted, the Tulrat sinks half behind the boulder, its floppy ears hanging over the eye sockets of its turtle skull. "Ha ha ha!" laugh the children correctively. The old man now squats, legs as far apart as a yogi's, his torso in firelight as he raises the tablet into the air. With the tablet free of its bindings, he dips the face facing him toward the light as the puppets and the children watch around a vortex of smoke rising from 3 spikes of flame in the fire pit. "Lor is the formal way of addressing a being that is intersexed, a two-legged with the sex between the sexes," says he, his shape framed by a star-speckled vacuum. "As I am a Mr. and my wife is a Mrs., so Avvu is a Lor," the old man says, his face in a curious light from below, forehead and hat in shadow. Above him and Grandma, a shooting star fires by. She droops her head thoughtfully into the light and raises a finger as if to remind the children of something she herself forgot. "Oh yes, I remember what the stranger said."
The air is clear and seemingly smokeless, where twinkling stars shine through. The old man suddenly appears spry, tossing his staff to his left hand as if about to spring with his entire body into the fire itself. The children's tiny heads in the background gaze at this development as he says, "On Cayenne, there are very important roles for the Lors. Typical families there even have them." The squiddy moppet hovers above the rock while the Tulrat appears simultaneously more puppet-like and more rabbit-like, staunchly attached to his mechanism behind the rock.
"Two-leggeds have mothers,"
says the squid.
"And they have fathers,"
adds the Fantouche Tulrat. The old woman crosses her hands peacefully and quietly smiles with anticipation as the puppets seem to float above the rock behind and above them. The old man leans so close to the fire that his loincloth almost appears white, and his body casts a great shadow on the rock behind him. As he smiles with satisfaction and swings a directive finger over the glow, "Yes, and they have?" A child whose saucer-wide eyes in the shadow of his cheeks express terror unbends his clenched fingers and shouts with nostrils flaring, "Old people!" Children behind him look on with supportive surprise as a bead of sweat flies from his curly head. The old woman rests one hand on the arm she uses to reach up and cover her mouth as her hips touch the old man's. She leans into him and smothers a laugh, glancing at Grandpa's lemon-sucking expression. "Huh?" he says, leaning on his staff. Picking up on the ridiculous moment, the old man thrusts his index finger over the fire, apparently pointing to the lot of children, and smiles. "No, lovers! Lors are so designated in a mother-father-lover trio because their role is to love." His eyes peer out from under his heavy brow as he leans into the firelight, again casting his great shadow on the top of his hand and on the rock behind him. A huddle of 5 or so children seem to be in a hushed consultation. One with a curl on the top of their head and strands of hair framing their face asks,
"But what is a lore? Is it a woman or a man?"
The old woman hunches down again while the old man stands with 2 fists as far apart as he can make them, his left arm clutching the staff. Children sit on the ground or a Y-shaped stump or stand around the fire that seems calmer if still tall and hot. Smoke lit by the fire widens over the scene as it is carried by the evening air to shining starlight. The puppets seem to lean on their trappings as they watch passively from the top of the rock. The slope of the ledge supporting the spying children is in the right foreground, but we can barely see a couple of the grumpy children here listening to the old man's supportive speech, while on the left, brush and plant life accents our remote nest.
"Lores are beings who can see the spirit inside themselves, who acknowledge that we all have aspects that can be grouped under titles, but who see a deeper truth of being that is beyond the small labels of woman or man, boy or girl."
The children, sensing a lesson, look meditatively into the fire or else watch the elders shuffle about the fire. The coals of the fire can be seen through its diminished height, as the old woman squats on the fronts of her feet and picks something up to place in her bowl. The old man stands half upright and senses the moment while the old woman squints in the light and smiles. A taller child with longer waves of hair and uneven tucks of pant legging unconsciously places her hand on the back of her companion and asks,
"Are we all Lores?" "No, and you'd be Loves," replies the old woman. "Only children with both the sex of a boy and girl are Loves. They grow up to be Lores. Grandpa is just being obtuse."
Looking through the 2 sockets of the Tulrat to the empty space on its left, we see this panel framing mainly the squiddy moppet as she raises 2 tentacles and tilts helpfully into the discussion.
"Yes, but the rainbow 2-leggeds of Cayenne do not typically kill boys who love boys, girls who love girls, or loves who love loves. There are also those who fit no label there."
The Tulrat's crackled skull face seems to emanate sound from its nostril as it adds,
"Yes, there's a hideous array of those that do not love begetting children as nature intended."
In 2 subsequent panels, we zoom into the Tulrat's empty, staring visage, its tiny, sharp teeth surely clacking as it rattles on.
"There are Lorish boys who love only girly lores, boyish women who love only Lorish lores, manly girls who want women who love only themselves, sick and twisted perversions of nature. There are even manly men who love only womanly women, and girly girls who love only boyish boys who pair up in couples."
The squiddy moppet is in a flurry of whipping tentacles as it beats the Tulrat silly.
Whap, 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 whap. "Stupid," they say. "That's exactly the people who you said you like best, the man-woman pairs." "Eep,"
replies the Tulrat as its beads and limbs are tangled in the assault. Children laugh and point at the swift moppety justice. The old woman scrunches her face in a political smirk and raises her long bony finger as the subdued fire sparks helpfully blur in the foreground. We see her tapering from the bottom of the panel up to her necklace, neck, chin, and forefinger, her upper lip, lower eyes, and hair in the contrapposto of the dying light.
"And you forget, Turtle Butt. Sometimes the children begotten are Loves, who will grow up to be Lores. Male, female, and Lael are all born there."
Hovering at their height, but from a distance above the hill to the cave, we see the scene shrunk to a cluster of ants around a fire glow with a disintegrating smoke cloud rising above. We hear their voices continue.
"And from what we've heard on Cayenne, the Lael is necessary to produce a child from the female's egg. Yes, the man is the seed and the woman is the egg, but the lore is the care, which hatches all children of 2-leggeds.
From behind a child in black shadow, we see them leaning away from the Fantouche Tulrat's wand, which has just been swung in their direction as the puppet addresses them specifically.
"That is what you are on my world, intersexed 2-legged child. The great hero Lor'Avvu was such a love, like you, Dana."
"Avvu?" The children's voices inquire at the theater, while the squiddy moppet seems to just hover above the rock, gazing at the fire with its blank expression. From slightly above, we see Dana looking down at the fire, their mussed hair and soft grin giving them a dreamy and distracted look. Their hands on their tucked knees put all their torso but their shoulders in shadow. The fire draws long waving shadows from the rocks on the ground as if they were an element of the fire itself.
And Z liked the pronouns Z and Zer instead of he and his or she and hers, the Tulrat adds.
From a similar vantage point, we see the child look up at the theatrics as the Tulrat concludes.
Such ridiculous pronouns have no real place on Cayenne anymore, dear Queek.
The squid and Tulrat figures droop over the rock top, subtle strings from the base of Queek the moppet, and sack appendages dangling from Crumb the Fantouche Tulrat.
You sound sad about it, Crumb,
replies the squid, and Crumb adds,
Yes, it is sad, for there was once a conflict in Avu's time among these people who looked like the children here, which caused...
Somehow a shadow manages to cover the entire Tulrat, as its face must now be towards the back of the rock, firelight indicated behind him.
Did it destroy them?
Asks the old woman off-panel. The Tulrat, somewhat standing on the rock, still hiding his face and with claws crossed on his wand, replies sternly,
This is why we must have the law.
The old man's right half is in the firelight as his narrowed eyes meaningfully point up to the rock at his left. His mustache droops as his mouth opens in a hissing expression. Bright smoke from the fire drifts behind him.
I see now. You saw a tragedy, and that is why you fear sexual differences. Avu saw war.
The old woman kneels on the ground with her arm around Dana, whose expression says he is lost in thought.
So, Avu, an intersex child, became a great champion, a hero, the old woman points out.
Her face appears youthful behind the wrinkles, her serious and stony expression still belying some excitement while sharing something related to law. With her other hand she points directively. Dana's eyes glisten and their head seems to fire to the top of their outstretched neck, even while showing a face of calm inquiry.
Hero?
The child says. The squid leaps into the air, two long tentacles stretched from one end of the rock to the other, while the rest of her flying body is in shadow above the little fire left above charred logs.
Are you going to let me tell the story, or do you three fossils plan on flowing all night?
The Tulrat stands on the rock, querying.
Flowing?
As he leans back from his wand, turning back to face the full audience allayed in unified silhouette. As the cold starry night sinks the old man and children into shadow, the old woman warms her body from the fire and children warm their backs. The knobby little old man tilts his ear and the saggy old woman tilts her head as he carries the tablet. Says she,
Grandpa, we know parts of this story, don't we? We could help these slow creatures tell it a bit better than they.
Adds he,
Oh, but Grandma, this is just one tablet of a very long, long story I mayn't fully get right, and these children don't have time to sit and...
Tell us! We want to hear!
The children clamor, shouting and eyes bright, clenched or sly, as they clearly enjoy pushing each other out of the way for the most impact. The old woman and old man press their heads together in the clamor. One of their hands rests on the handle of the old man's walking stick in the foreground. The old woman smiles from under eyelids heavy with relief, and the old man's eye shifts to her grin, and his toothy mouth sneaks out from under his mustache, whispering,
Thank Tangri we didn't do all that for nothing.
Our wide view is framed by the boulder on the left, and on the right children leaning back from an exploding effect roaring from the stone fire circle. As the old man leans away from the fire, seemingly guiding the great plume of smoke and flame out of the fire pit, his right arm is thrust back, holding his staff, and his left is extended upward in a dramatic act, fingers spread before a round smoke cloud.
Good, then settle in, he says,
behind him in shadow and face masked by his impressive gesture. The puppets can just be seen gazing from the top of the rock as some children lean back from the sudden burst in heat.
For this tale rewards attention to it, and I won't tell it well enough without the questions you are fated to ask of it this night. As a story is not a simple drama, but a magic portal to another dimension.
From the fire we can look up at the tablet in his hands, to his arms, fuzz-dappled chest, neck, chin, and fully lit face, then his dark hat and star-freckled sky. The tablet's spiral pattern is more distinguishable, but the characters are too small to read from this side, and the implication is that the tablet is covered in unknown symbols.
I cannot read this alien scratch, but unlike Crumb the turtle-butt, I've met one who can. A stranger, yes. They told me that Cayenne is a planet filled with fantastic and strange people, some from other lands or planes," says the old man.
Now we shift our perspective to see the old woman, her outstretched bony fingers palm face down to the fire, her gently tensed arm, wrinkled chest features, bony necklace, loose-skinned jaw, pursed thin lips, handsome cheek, roaming eye, bangs and hair tie, crowned at last by her great puff of grayed oracular hair.
"The rainbow people still live there, albeit in a changed form after this history. They are named the Jeenare. Jeenare. And in this time they were not happy," says the old woman below the same stars.
3 of the spying children peek quite carefully above the ledge, thence their faces lit slightly by the fire glow.
"And they killed people of their great family frequently, even more than Turtle here kills his own,"
they hear the Squiddy Moppet continuing.
"What were the other people?"
asks a child's voice. The Squiddy Moppet responds,
"The Jeenare themselves were already made up of many spirits of many worlds who merged, and the universe knew Cayenne to be a very good place for raising creatures from mere beast to more than beast."
Queek's bulging blank eyes appear to be almost goggles hovering above her funny drooping tentacles, and the 2 bulges cast shadows on either side of her squishy pyramid-shaped head. Grandma's fingers extend in an impressive gesture as she steps forward toward children like a powerful being. Her face is covered in a shining mask glistening in the firelight, with simple floral patterns shooting from the crown. The old man holds a mask of his own in hand as he peers at the scene through licks of flame. The children are suddenly overtaken by this turn of events and stare with a measure of concern. Perhaps they did not expect to be so transported. While smoke billows around the rock with the old man's shadow cast upon it and the Squiddy Moppet apparently just hovering above, the children's heads in the foreground move in consternation to the voice of the old woman.
"And beings from across the stars wanted to live there, but were also scared of facing its council of gods."
Her eyes look through the eye holes, while other parts of her face may be seen through the shapes of the mask that describe this being's nose and mouth. By the flame's light, the old man's body no longer leads to a head, but another shining mask, decorated in a motif of leaves, old hair, and an impressively straight caricature of Grandpa's own mustache. His eyes look through the round-rimmed eye ports, and the shape of this being's nose is described by a nose-shaped hole that divides the mask from the mustache to the top of the mask. A great cloud of smoke seems to dominate the sky behind him, while to the side of this plume the Squiddy Moppet still hovers above the rock, its 2 long tentacles outstretched. In the foreground a child's face is lit up and looking up at him with trepidation as he speaks.
"But the 12 gods of Cayenne, who lived safely in their sun, for they had no moon."
The children's shapes are faded by low-lit smoke from blazing flames dancing on the burning logs and coals. Above this layer, sparks fly mystically yet naturally around the dancing torsos of Grandpa and Grandma in their masks. Grandma holds a stick with a great ball of some naturally patterned material on its end, reminiscent of the Tulrat's back or seed pods, yet clearly made into a sphere bigger than an adult head. The story continues.
"They saw the violence and despair of the Jeenare, and they said to themselves, 'Our world is in danger,' they say. And thus they convened to determine."
The masked figures observe the ball lowered into the flame, their bodies in shining highlights of sweat from the closeness of the fire, while stars behind them are wiped out by wisps of light from the fire's intensity.
"What course destiny would take," the voices say.
The old man and old woman have transformed behind the masks, their eyes purposefully looking out to an unknown place as our view of the ball is swallowed in its flame. This concludes the introduction to Act 1 of Lor'Avvu, a fairy story for mature humans. In Part 4, we will begin Chapter 1 in the fairy plane, as the story of Lor'Avvu is told by the Jeenare themselves. As we leave the world of Grandma, Grandpa, and the children, remember to keep your wits about you. Cayenne is not a world for humans to tread carelessly on. Until next time, be well, and as they say in the Jeenare fairy language of Vul, Absef. Go well.